Greetings, my fellow adventurers. It's Alara. Welcome back to our cozy sanctuary, where the magic of Christmas and the warmth of holiday cheer come alive in tales of wonder and unexpected journeys. Tonight, together, we'll explore a story where courage is tested, hope is rekindled, and the magic of Christmas brings light to the darkest of nights. So, find your coziest spot. Let the enchantment of this festive world spark your imagination, and prepare to be carried away on a tale of discovery, connection, and holiday magic. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from, and which stories you'd love to hear next. Let's begin. The snow fell in thick, whispering drifts, blanketing the town of Pinehaven in a peaceful silver glow. Strings of lights flickered on rooftops, and the scent of cinnamon and pine hung in the air, carried on the icy wind. It was Christmas Eve, the time of year when even the weariest of hearts found a flicker of magic. Yet, for Edward Collins, the holiday felt like anything but magical. Edward sat in his small apartment above a cluttered antique shop he inherited from his late grandfather. The shop itself was filled with relics of lives long past, ornate clocks, dusty books, and strange trinkets no one quite knew the purpose of. Tonight, however, the shop was closed, and Edward sat in his armchair, staring at the faint glow of a pathetic little tree he'd half-heartedly decorated. The lights blinked sporadically, a sad echo of the festive displays outside. Another year, another lonely Christmas, he muttered, taking a sip of lukewarm cocoa. His cat, a plump tabby named Muffin, lay curled on the windowsill, watching the snow with more interest than her owner. Edward sighed, his mind drifting to the life he once imagined. One filled with adventure and purpose, not an endless routine of dusting shelves and haggling over chipped porcelain. A sudden, heavy thud jolted him from his thoughts. It sounded as though something, or someone, had landed on the roof. Edward frowned, setting his mug down and glancing toward the ceiling. Another thud followed, this time accompanied by what sounded suspiciously like bells. Edward rose to his feet, his heart pounding. "Probably a raccoon," he muttered, though he wasn't entirely convinced. Grabbing a flashlight, he made his way to the creaky staircase that led to the roof. Muffin lifted her head, blinking lazily, but offered no assistance. The cold hit him like a slap as he stepped onto the snow-covered roof. His breath formed clouds in the air as he scanned the dark expanse with his flashlight. At first, he saw nothing unusual, just the glistening snow and the distant twinkle of Christmas lights from neighboring houses. But then his beam landed on something that made him freeze in place. A sleigh. A sleigh painted a rich crimson and trimmed with gold, sat on his rooftop as if it had always belonged there. Its runners gleamed in the moonlight, and an assortment of brightly wrapped gifts was piled in the back. The sleigh was hitched to 8 reindeer, each one standing patiently, their breath misting in the cold air. And then there was the man. He stood next to the sleigh, dressed in a thick red coat trimmed with white fur. He was unmistakably Santa Claus. Or, at least, that's what Edward's startled brain told him. The man was tall and broad, with a white beard that seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight. But his face was pale, and he looked unsteady, gripping the side of the sleigh as if to keep from falling. "Hey!" Edward called out, his voice sharp with a mix of confusion and concern. "What are you doing up here?" Santa turned to him, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. "You," he said, his voice deep and commanding despite his apparent weariness. "You're the one." Edward blinked. "I'm sorry?" Before he could process what was happening, Santa staggered forward, reaching into his coat. From within, he pulled out what appeared to be a golden key, intricately designed and shimmering with an almost ethereal light. "Take this," Santa said, thrusting the key into Edward's hand. His grip was surprisingly strong, and Edward had no choice but to accept it. The moment his fingers closed around the key, a strange warmth spread through his palm, and the world seemed to tilt slightly. "Wait, what is this?" Edward demanded. "What's going on?" "There's no time," Santa said, his voice urgent. I can't do it tonight. The sleigh, the gifts, the children, they're all counting on you." "Counting on me to do what?" Edward's voice rose in pitch, his heart racing. "You're not seriously saying..." But Santa wasn't listening. His knees buckled, and he collapsed into the snow with a heavy sigh. Edward knelt beside him, panic rising in his chest. "Hey, are you okay? Do I need to call someone? An elf? A reindeer doctor?" Santa managed a faint chuckle. "You'll be fine," he murmured. "The key knows what to do." And with that, his eyes closed, and he went still. Edward stared at the unconscious man. Santa Claus, apparently, lying in a heap of red velvet and fur. The golden key in his hand pulsed faintly, as though alive, and the sleigh behind him seemed to shimmer with an expectant energy. "This is a dream," Edward muttered to himself. "I'm asleep in my chair. Probably drank bad cocoa." He pinched his arm, hard. The sting was sharp and real. The reindeer stomped their hooves, their bells jingling softly, as if impatient. One of them, a large one with a scar above its left eye, turned its head and fixed Edward with a knowing look. He could have sworn it raised an eyebrow. "Okay, this is ridiculous," Edward said, standing up. "I'm not Santa Claus. I don't even like kids that much, and I certainly don't know how to drive a sleigh." The key grew warmer in his hand, and a soft hum filled the air. Edward glanced down at it, then at the sleigh. The gifts in the back seemed to glow faintly, and the reindeer shifted restlessly, their breath steaming in the cold. "Right," Edward said, taking a shaky breath. "Let's say this is real. Let's say I'm supposed to deliver presents. Where do I even start?" The answer came not from the reindeer or the sleigh, but from the key itself. As Edward held it up, a map unfurled before his eyes, glowing in the air like a projection. Tiny points of light marked various locations, and a path connected them, winding across the map like a golden thread. "This has got to be the weirdest Christmas Eve of my life," Edward muttered. He climbed into the sleigh, the leather seat creaking beneath him. The reins lay before him, and the reindeer turned their heads to watch him expectantly. Edward hesitated, then grabbed the reins with both hands. "Okay," he said, his voice trembling. "Let's, go?" The sleigh jerked forward, nearly throwing him off his seat. The reindeer leapt into the air, their hooves leaving the roof in a spray of snow. Edward shouted in alarm as the sleigh rose higher and higher, the rooftops shrinking below him. "I can't believe this is happening," he muttered, gripping the reins for dear life. The wind whipped past him, carrying with it the faint sound of bells and laughter. For the first time in years, Edward felt a flicker of something he couldn't quite name. Excitement, maybe, or wonder. But as the sleigh soared into the night, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The cold wind howled around Edward as the sleigh soared through the night sky, the reindeer pulling him with a speed that made his head spin. The town of Pinehaven was already a distant cluster of glowing lights below, and the stars above seemed impossibly close. His breath formed frantic clouds as he gripped the reins tightly, his knuckles white with the effort. "This is insane," he muttered to himself, glancing nervously at the reindeer. "Completely insane. I'm just an antique shop owner. I'm not supposed to be flying around like this." The reindeer, unbothered by his panic, plowed ahead with a smooth efficiency. The golden key in Edward's pocket pulsed faintly, its warmth radiating through the fabric of his coat. The map still hovered faintly before him, glowing in the air like a beacon. Each pinpoint of light represented a stop, and the path it marked shimmered with an almost magical energy. Edward took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. "All right," he said aloud, as much to himself as to the reindeer. "Let's figure this out. Deliver presents, save Christmas, and then, I don't know, wake up from whatever weird dream this is." The first stop wasn't far. The map guided the sleigh toward a quiet, snow-covered neighborhood nestled at the edge of a dense forest. As they descended, Edward could see the cozy glow of houses, their windows adorned with twinkling lights. The sleigh landed with a soft thud on the roof of a modest cottage, and the reindeer came to a gentle halt. "Okay, step one," Edward muttered, climbing out of the sleigh. "Don't fall off the roof." The snow crunched softly under his boots as he approached the massive sack of presents in the back of the sleigh. It looked much larger up close, its surface shimmering faintly, as though imbued with some kind of magic. Hesitantly, Edward reached into the sack. His fingers brushed against something, and when he pulled it out, he found himself holding a beautifully wrapped box with a bright red bow. As he stared at the box, words appeared on the surface, written in elegant golden script. For Emily, age 6. "Well, at least it's labeled," Edward muttered. He looked around, realizing he had no idea how to get the present inside. "Wait, do I have to go down the chimney?" The key in his pocket grew warm again, and a soft hum filled the air. Before Edward could protest, the golden key slipped out of his pocket and floated toward the chimney. The bricks shimmered as if dissolving into thin air, leaving a safe, open passage. "Of course," Edward said, rolling his eyes. "Magic. Why not?" He crouched and peered into the chimney. The drop wasn't far, and the golden glow from the key illuminated the way. "Here goes nothing," he muttered, clutching the present tightly as he slid down. Edward landed softly in the living room of the cottage, the warmth of the hearth contrasting sharply with the cold outside. The room was simple, but cozy, decorated with garlands of evergreen and a small Christmas tree that sparkled with homemade ornaments. A plate of cookies and a glass of milk sat waiting on the coffee table. Edward hesitated, staring at the scene. He had never believed in Santa Claus. Not really. Yet here he was, standing in someone's living room, a wrapped gift in his hands, and reindeer waiting on the roof. Carefully, he placed the gift under the tree. As he did, he noticed a piece of paper sticking out from beneath the cookies. Curious, he picked it up and read the handwritten note. Dear Santa, thank you for always remembering me. This year, I hope you're doing okay too. Love, Emily. Edward swallowed hard, the words striking him in a way he hadn't expected. For a moment, he simply stood there. The note crinkled in his hand. All right, he said softly, setting the note back on the table. One down. The key hummed faintly in his pocket again, pulling him toward the chimney. With a small leap, he was back on the roof, where the sleigh and reindeer awaited. The next stop came faster than he expected. The sleigh moved seamlessly between rooftops, the sack of presents somehow always producing the exact right gift. With each delivery, Edward began to notice patterns. Notes left for Santa, carefully arranged cookies, and stockings hung with care. Each house told a story, and with each stop, Edward's initial irritation gave way to something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. By the time the sleigh reached the edge of the city, Edward was beginning to think he might actually pull this off. He was even starting to enjoy the surreal experience of flying over rooftops, the wind in his face, and the stars shining brightly above. But then the reindeer faltered. Edward frowned as the sleigh lurched slightly, the reindeer slowing midair. What's going on? He called out, as if expecting an answer. The answer came not from the reindeer, but from the sky itself. A dark shadow loomed ahead, its shape obscured by the falling snow. At first, Edward thought it was a cloud, but as it drew closer, he realized it was something far stranger and far more dangerous. The shape resolved into a massive flock of black birds, their wings beating furiously against the wind. They moved as one, a swirling mass that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. What the? Edward's words were cut off as the flock surged toward them, their cries filling the night with a deafening cacophony. The reindeer reared, their bells jangling wildly as the birds dove toward the sleigh. Edward clung to the reins, his heart pounding. "This can't be happening," he shouted. The birds attacked in waves, their sharp beaks and talons tearing at the sleigh. One of them swooped dangerously close to Edward's face, forcing him to duck. The reindeer struggled to maintain their course, their movements erratic as they fought to escape the onslaught. Come on," Edward yelled, pulling the reins desperately. The sleigh dipped and swayed, the sack of presents nearly toppling over the side. The golden key in his pocket flared to life, emitting a bright, blinding light. The birds screeched in unison, their formation breaking apart as the light expanded, forcing them to retreat. Edward squinted against the glow, his grip on the reins unyielding. Slowly, the chaos subsided, and the birds disappeared into the night, leaving only the sound of the wind and Edward's ragged breathing. Well, he muttered, slumping back in his seat. That's new. The reindeer resumed their steady flight, the sleigh gliding smoothly once more. Edward glanced down at the golden key, its light fading back to a faint glow. Whatever you are, he said softly, you'd better get me through the rest of this night. The sleigh soared onward, and for the first time Edward began to wonder if there was more to this job than delivering presents. The sleigh glided through the frosty air, the distant horizon beginning to blush with the first hints of dawn. Edward's hands were raw from gripping the reins, his body aching from the night's trials. Yet, a strange sense of determination filled him. He had survived the chaos of the flock, delivered gifts to countless homes, and even started to feel a glimmer of Christmas spirit, something he hadn't felt in years. The golden key in his pocket hummed faintly, its warmth a reassuring presence. Edward glanced at the glowing map hovering before him. There were only a few stops left. He couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and trepidation. The night had been anything but predictable, and the key's mysterious energy hinted that one last challenge awaited. All right, Edward muttered, adjusting his grip on the reins. Let's finish this. The reindeer, seemingly sensing his resolve, picked up speed, their bells jingling softly as they soared through the crisp morning air. The map guided the sleigh to a remote farmhouse nestled in a snow-covered valley. The house was old and modest, its windows glowing faintly with the warmth of a single candle. Edward pulled the reins gently, and the reindeer descended gracefully onto the roof. The sleigh landed with a soft crunch of snow. Edward climbed out, his boots sinking into the powdery surface. The golden key pulsed in his pocket as he reached into the shimmering sack of presents. His fingers brushed against something unfamiliar, smooth, cold, and heavier than the other gifts he had delivered that night. He pulled it out and found a small, intricately carved wooden box, tied with a silver ribbon. Words appeared on the box in glowing script. For Thomas, age 12. Edward frowned, feeling an odd weight in the air. There was something different about this delivery, something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. He glanced around, the silence of the valley pressing in on him. Well, Thomas, he muttered, gripping the box tightly. Let's see what all the fuss is about. He approached the chimney, which shimmered and opened as it had at every other stop. Sliding down, Edward landed softly in a small, dimly lit living room. The furnishings were simple: a worn sofa, a rickety table, and a small Christmas tree adorned with homemade ornaments. By the tree, a boy sat cross-legged, staring at the flickering candle on the windowsill. Edward froze. Hi? The boy turned, his eyes wide with shock. Santa, he whispered. Edward's first instinct was to correct him, but something in the boy's expression stopped him. There was hope in his eyes, fragile but unmistakable. Edward swallowed hard and gave a small nod. That's right. I'm here to deliver something special. He approached the boy and knelt, holding out the box. This is for you, Thomas. The boy hesitated, his small hands trembling as he reached for the box. The moment his fingers touched it, the silver ribbon unraveled, and the lid lifted on its own, Inside was a tiny music box, its surface etched with stars and moons. As the lid opened, a gentle melody filled the room, soft and hauntingly beautiful. Thomas's eyes filled with tears. "It's my mom's song," he whispered. "She used to sing it to me every night before she passed." Edward's throat tightened. He didn't know how to respond, so he simply placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Merry Christmas, Thomas," he said softly. The boy nodded, clutching the music box to his chest. "Thank you, Santa." Edward stood, his heart heavy, but full in a way he hadn't expected. He climbed back up the chimney, the golden key guiding him effortlessly. As he settled into the sleigh, he glanced back at the house, the faint strains of the music box's melody following him into the sky. The sleigh climbed higher, the reindeer moving with renewed vigor. Edward leaned back, staring up at the stars. The night had been far more than he'd bargained for. What had started as an absurd and impossible task had become something deeply meaningful. The golden key pulsed again, brighter this time. Edward sat up as the map reappeared before him. But this time, there were no stops, no glowing dots. Instead, the map directed him back to Pinehaven, where his strange journey had begun. "Well," Edward said, exhaling sharply, "I guess it's time to go home." The reindeer turned, their flight smooth and purposeful. As the familiar rooftops of Pinehaven came into view, Edward felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. The golden glow of the key began to fade, its warmth dissipating as the sleigh landed gently on the roof of his shop. Edward climbed out, his legs shaky. The sack of presents had vanished, and the reindeer watched him silently, their breath misting in the cold air. He turned to find the figure of Santa Claus standing nearby, looking much healthier than when they had first met. "You did well," Santa said, his voice deep and steady. Edward blinked. "You're okay? What even happened to you?" Santa smiled faintly. "Sometimes, even I need a little help. And tonight, you were exactly what Christmas needed." Edward stared at him, the weight of the night settling over him. "I don't know how you do this every year." "You found out tonight," Santa replied. "It's not about the presents or the sleigh. It's about the hope we bring, the connections we make." He stepped closer, placing a hand on Edward's shoulder. "And you, Edward Collins, brought hope to many tonight." The golden key floated out of Edward's pocket, hovering between them before disappearing in a flash of light. The reindeer began to move, their bells jingling softly as they prepared to take flight. "What now?" Edward asked. Santa climbed into the sleigh, his movements steady and confident. "Now, you go back to your life, but don't forget what you've learned tonight." With that, the sleigh rose into the sky, the sound of bells fading into the night. Edward stood on the roof, staring after it until it disappeared from view. Edward woke the next morning in his armchair, the faint glow of his little Christmas tree blinking beside him. Muffin stretched lazily on the windowsill, her tail flicking idly. For a moment, Edward wondered if it had all been a dream, but then he noticed a small, intricately carved wooden box on the table in front of him. When he opened it, he found an old pocket watch, its surface engraved with his family crest. The hands of the watch ticked softly, and inside the lid was a faded inscription. Time is not lost. It waits for those who seek it with an open heart. Edward ran his thumb over the inscription, a wave of warmth and nostalgia filling him. The watch had belonged to his grandfather, long thought lost, now mysteriously returned to him. Smiling softly, Edward leaned back in his chair. Outside, the town of Pinehaven buzzed with Christmas morning excitement. And for the first time in years, Edward felt truly at peace. As the tale of Edward's extraordinary Christmas Eve journey draws to a close, let this story remind us of the unexpected courage that lies within us all, and the magic that can be found in even the smallest acts of kindness. Remember, my fellow adventurers, that in the face of uncertainty and wonder, the spirit of giving and the warmth of connection can light our way. Thank you for joining me tonight. Until next time, may your dreams be filled with the glow of Christmas lights, the joy of shared moments, and the promise of new magical adventures waiting to unfold. Good night.